we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age. Who are these rulers? What are these powers? And what does it mean to wrestle against them? This video will dive into knowledge that has been passed down over the past 2,000 years. These are the tactics written down by the saints and preserved within Orthodox Christianity. In order to know how to cure a sickness, the first step is identifying it, so that the path to healing can be found and implemented. In the context of the spiritual life, the ascetic fathers and mothers of old define the cause of spiritual disease as the passions. A passion is a sin that has such impulse in one's life that it controls and impacts relationships with ourselves, others, and God. A sin is seen as a sickness and a behavior that incorrectly utilizes and perverts human faculties that are created for the good. A sin is not just failing to fulfill a moral code, but it is an act contrary to nature. These sins first develop as suggestions, then thoughts, then actions, then habits, and then impulse behaviors that warp reality. These perversions are usually self-gratifying, self-pleasing, and self-loving that end up destroying the natural selflessness and self-emptying love that man was created for, to live in unity with himself, his neighbor, and God. For instance, gluttony is a misuse of man's senses, overloading them through indulgence to please the self. This causes effects on the body, dulls the mind, and paralyzes the soul, perverting our nature. It corrupts the relationship with self by various physical ailments, corrupts the relationship with neighbor by hoarding and neglecting the poor, and because it dulls the mind and paralyzes the soul, assent and prayer becomes corrupted, affecting our relationship with God. Thus, Saint Maximus the Confessor, a 7th century monk, observed, "It is not food that is evil, but gluttony. Not the begetting of children, but unchastity. Not material things, but avarice. Not esteem, but self-esteem. This being so, it is only the misuse of things that is evil, and such misuse occurs when the intellect fails to cultivate its natural powers." While the saints and ascetics see these passions as enslavement, our, quote, advanced society defines a meaningful existence by self-gratification and feeding the passions because its aim is pleasure. To get in as much pleasure as one can before death comes to the door. The world is constantly creating stimuli to feed this goal, yet in such an evolved world, saturated with every pleasure imaginable at one's fingertips, these are more rampant now than ever. Time and time again, it has been proven that passions are not the way to freedom, but the way to enslavement, chaining us in the dark prison that the world has built around us. Therefore, in order to die to this world's death-dealing and enslaving ideology, we must turn completely against it and root out its vestiges that have done harm to our souls. The fight begins first off with a true examination of ourselves and a recognition that we are sick with the passions, even possessed by them, and need healing. This examination requires the Lord's help, for many times the passions are hidden within the more inner depths of the heart. In this examination, we identify the chief sin in our life and begin to wage war against that one passion, so that we don't burn out trying to tackle them all at once. Daily examination is needed. We must peer into ourselves and look to see what lies beneath the surface of the heart in order to identify elusive sins. We should ask ourselves the following questions to know what passions are paramount in our life and are doing the most damage. Do you lie or deceive yourself or others to cover up the passion or sin? Do you feel irritated or restless if the passion can't be fulfilled? Are you thinking about this passion throughout the day? Do you feel uneasy and shameful when you engage in the passion? Is this thing a rooted pattern that I can't or don't want to change? Once passions are identified, spiritual maladies are identified, and it takes work to cure them. Just like with any bodily disease, spiritual diseases have remedies and regimens one employs to find healing. This regimented way of life is called asceticism, and is the act of self-denial and gaining control over the passions. The remedies are various virtues that are natural to man and begin to correct his soul in a holistic way. If we choose to wage war against the things that corrupt our lives and cause damage to the soul, it takes determination, perseverance, and watchfulness over our thoughts, the place where it all begins. Unfortunately, our society has trained us to accept every thought whizzing about, even to the point of defining ourselves by them. In no other time have unbridled thoughts been given such prestige and importance. In reality, the mind is a battlefield, and thoughts are primary artillery. Not every thought is healthy, and one may acknowledge that to a certain extent. However, it is truly impossible to conquer the things that harm the soul if one does not watch over deceitful thoughts. Saint Joseph the Cave Dweller, a saint of modern times, reflected, "Watchfulness is unceasing attentiveness, alertness, or vigilance, whereby one keeps watch over one's inward thoughts and fantasies, so that they don't enter the heart." Thoughts that provoke passions and ignite the craving for spiritually destructive behavior ought to be treated with contempt and immediately driven out from the mind. It is driven out by these remedies: ignoring the thought, praying the Jesus prayer, a version of which reads, "Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner," or acting in virtue contrary to the thought. When one is addicted to a certain passion, however, thoughts may ignite such a fire that it seems impossible to quench, even if one wants to. This is enslavement, but one has the power to break free. Below are the definitions of certain passions and the regimens and remedies one can use to gain this freedom. All cures have been tested through time by ascetics. However, one will also find great consolation in an experienced spiritual guide, a priest or wise layperson found in the Orthodox Church. These are the remedies of the Fathers to root out the passions that have captivated the heart. Gluttony. A material passion that is visible and acted out through overindulgence. Gluttony can be the chief cause of many sins, as it is identified to be the principal sin of Adam in the garden. When we crave luxurious foods and delight in overindulging the body, we are gluttonous. To remedy this passion, building up self-denial and temperance is paramount. John Cassian gives a simple rule: stop eating while still hungry, and do not continue until you are satisfied. The second step to go beyond just abstinence is to eat more Spartan dishes, as St. John of the Ladder calls them. That is, foods that are not luxurious or appetizing. Lust, a child of gluttony. As satiety in food is the father of fornication, the first step is to subdue the body through keeping the proper fasts of the Church, making vigils, deprivation of sleep or sleeping roughly, and performing bodily hardships. The second step is humility and watchfulness. Watchfulness is a constant sober and vigilant attitude accompanied by a close watching of the movements of one's soul. Watchfulness is inextricably linked to unceasing prayer, specifically the Jesus prayer. When one notices an evil thought or desire tempting their soul, they must destroy it with the Jesus prayer. We are often tempted by images, especially concerning the passion of unchastity. As Saint Hesychios explains, most of us do not realize that all evil thoughts are but images of material and worldly things. Yet if we persist in watchful prayer, this will rid our minds of all such images. Purity of heart, the necessary partner of bodily asceticism, can be attained with watchfulness, the constant destruction of evil movements in the soul by unceasing prayer to Christ, and the humility to realize that only God can give us the power to carry out these supernatural feats. Once purity of heart is attained, the passion of unchastity will be defeated. Avarice. Saint Nilos points out that avarice is also related to gluttony, for the gluttony needs money first of all, so as to satisfy his ever-present desire, even though it can never be satisfied. The same saint also prescribes the following treatment: let us cure the passion of avarice through voluntary poverty. This is the first step: liberality and voluntary poverty. The second step is replacing our love for material goods with the love of spiritual treasures. This second step is acquired with the help of spiritual readings and contemplations, limiting what we allow into our soul, and accumulating only those things that elevate our soul. Avarice is closely connected to anger and irritability. Anger. Anger was given to ward off evil and achieve salvation. Fallen man goes against the insensitive power's natural purpose when he directs his anger towards his neighbor. Our love of pleasure also causes us to become angry when we are abruptly deprived of our hedonistic habits. The first step in overcoming this passion is realizing that we must direct our hatred towards sinful behavior and not towards the sinner. The second step is to know our own sins and begin to hate them. Another indispensable aid in the defeat of this passion is obedience. Saint Isaiah writes, "He who wishes to acquire the anger that is in accordance with nature must uproot all self-will until he establishes within himself the state natural to the intellect." Along with the treatments given for the previously explained passions, anger also requires the redirection of our insensitive power and proper obedience if we are to overcome it. Acedia, a child of anger. This passion is characterized by a feeling of deadness to most activities, a lack of interest in the blessings of the future life, and an overall feeling of disparagement. Can be caused by a lack of work, idle talking, and a dearth of time spent in spiritual reading. The first step and best remedy from the Fathers is manual labor and remembrance of death, so as to not put off repentance for tomorrow. The second step is works of diligence. Despondency, closely related to acedia, characterized by an insufficient zeal for spiritual work and a lack of perseverance. The passion of despondency is often brought upon us when we are unable to fulfill our desires for pleasure or material possessions. This passion can also assail us after we have fallen from a high spiritual level into a sin such as unchastity. The first cure for this passion is simply prayer, as is stated by Evagrios. Prayer is the remedy for gloom and despondency. St. John Cassian also suggests fellowship as another step, that we should seek out the company of good fellow Orthodox Christians and trust in God. Another step is accepting and trusting in God's mercy with humility. St. John Climacus beautifully summarizes this truth when he writes, "It is impossible for us who have fallen into the pit of iniquities ever to be drawn out of it, unless we sink into the abyss of the humility of the repentant." Vainglory. This passion is characterized by forgetting that God is the source of all that is good, and the giver of every good thing we have, and we begin to ascribe all of our accomplishments to ourselves. This terrible passion can be awakened by almost any occurrence. It especially afflicts us after we do something good. Sometimes, the demons even allow us to easily prevail over one sin so that we might more readily become elated at this victory and then fall immediately into vainglory. The first remedy given by the Fathers is confession. St. John Cassian points out that by revealing our thoughts, especially ones pertaining to the passion of vainglory, to our confessor, we obtain a swift victory over the passions. The revealed thoughts then wither and die, especially through persistent confession. St. Diadochos also gives us another cure for a specific cause of self-esteem. When, as a result of visits from some of our brethren or some strangers, we are fiercely attacked by thoughts of self-esteem, it is good to relax our normal regime to a certain extent. In this way, the demon will be frustrated and driven out, regretting his attempt. Watchfulness, confession, and attributing all that is good to God will bring one to victory over self-esteem and leave only the last and greatest passion remaining. Pride. As a child is to a man, vainglory is to pride. Self-esteem is the short term, or momentary fall into prideful sins. In contrast, the passion of pride is the continual, unrepentant perseverance in this particular category of sins. St. Diadochos explains that pride can also be caused by God's withdrawal from us. Most of the treatments described above, such as confession, obedience, and watchfulness, will be of great help in defeating pride. However, attaining true humility is ultimately the surest path to uprooting pride. The obtainment of humility is greatly aided by the joyful acceptance of the hardships God sends us. According to St. Isaac, God permits warfare to besiege us, that we may learn humility. The truly humble soul has defeated pride with God's help.
I saw the snares of the evil one spread over all the earth. And I groaned, saying, "Who can escape such snares?" And I heard a voice saying to me,